Mark Bertoli joining us now from Abbott Wealth Financial. And actually, I have to say that watching that dog, it's a little bit mesmerizing, kind of like the American election, right? It's one of those things that you kind of feel like you have to watch.
Yeah, it's going to make for some good TV this summer, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely. It already has.
Yeah.
It already has. And definitely it puts people in different camps.
It does. And, as Canadians, I think we step back and we take those blinders off and look more at both sides of the equation. So it's amazing when you look at the spin that goes on things in the States. It's really something. Yeah,
and there's something going on here, but they change it into something completely different over here.
I think I'm going to go sign up for some advertising here when I'm done, because I've heard some statistics that the ratings for the first debate are going to be rivaling international events for TV ratings. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So because it's so polarized, people are very interested. There's a lot of interest in what's going on down there. That's for sure.
Definitely. And so what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I'm going to jump into U.S. politics.
Okay.
Which is a bad thing in my business, but I'm actually going to look at the financial markets as a result of U.S. politics.
Because it does affect them.
Over the history. Yeah, and I think there's some things that we should we could learn out of this too. So I brought a couple of charts to look back in time. This particular one is the S&P 500, the top chart on the left, and going from 1945 to 2015. So a little bit of time here. And it looks at the 4 years of presidency. So if you look here, the fourth year typically is going to be about a 6.1% return in the fourth year, okay? Third year is 16.1%, and typically throughout history, the third year of a presidential cycle tends to be the most powerful in the financial markets.
Okay.
So that's interesting. I'd just like to jump to the next slide, because we're actually in the second term of a president. Right. So that changes things a little bit. Right at the very bottom of this slide, or the fourth year of this slide, in the second term, you'll see a negative 1.2%, and only 44% of the time the markets actually go up in a second term. Right. So, again, you can look at all throughout. Second terms tend to be okay. 67% of the time the markets go up. First terms about 65% of the time markets go up. So when I talk about term, Obama's second term is what I'm making reference to.
Okay.
So then I went and did some research and came to some other observations. So from 1900 to 2016.
Okay, so you got a big span.
116 years of second term, eighth year statistics.
Right.
The market typically on average goes down about 1.2%. Okay, on the eighth year. Now, this may be a different year, I'm not sure. The third year is typically the most powerful. The S&P 500 last year actually was slightly negative. So that was different than the long-term history as well. So
we're not following the pattern of history right now.
Right now, yeah. And there's been some other things. 44% of the time in the second term we get a positive market, but 2008 was actually skewed the numbers a little bit, because it was negative 41%, but it didn't have to do with the presidential cycle. It had to do with the financial crisis from the banking crisis.
Right.
So some say that was politically driven, but the result of that negative 41 was not because we were in the second term of a president. So that kind of threw that negative 1.2% number a little bit offline. So why is it less powerful in the second term? Markets do not like uncertainty. Okay, so when there's
they don't like change, they don't like uncertainty.
When there's an incumbent president and one that's going to be reelected, markets like that because they know the way the game's going to be played for the next 4 years.
They have an idea.
Or the same party, right? So president's final second year term is usually unpredictable. You'll see them wanting to create a legacy for themselves and maybe putting through some policy that they would not normally put through if they were looking for a second term.
Right.
So that adds to the unpredictability of the 8th year of a presidential cycle. So, and then the final year of the first term, re-election, 83%, if you have your first term, 83% chance that president's going to go to a second term. So, and we have one final slide, and I always look for what we can learn. So, know what you own, a micro level. So know your companies and predictability. And then look out for policy changes. That's a big one. So on a macro level, an example, the Republicans, you've heard Trump talk about that he's going to get coal miners back to work.
Right.
Well, that flies in the face of the pollution laws that the Democrats have.
Right.
So that's an example. Or pharmaceuticals. The Democrats want to cap the price of pharmaceuticals. That may affect that industry. And one more thing to look out for, just to end, between July 31st and October 31st, if the stock market goes up, there's an 82% chance throughout history that we will have an incumbent party or the Democrats will be reelected. So the stock markets can tell us some things outside of just numbers sometimes.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. So if it rises in the next couple of months and there's a
July
chance
to October, yeah.
Okay.
Because people feel confident that there is going to be a re-election of the Democrats and the rules are going to stay the same, as I said earlier. So that's the way it is.
That's the rub.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. So look at your stocks, see what you've got going on.
Know what you own. You want to own profitable companies that are difficult to compete with, difficult to replicate, and difficult to live without.
Definitely.
And they tend to make it through time. Royal Bank, for instance.
Buy makeup. No.
Royal Bank, for instance, great earnings, company's older in Canada itself.
Right.
It's been through all of those cycles. So there you go.
And still stuck around.
And still stuck around and doing
done
well. Absolutely.
All right. Okay, very interesting. Thanks so much for joining us today, Mark.
You bet. Thank you.
We'll be back in just a moment here on Midday.